use the Bloom's taxonomy to assess the different learners in our classrooms. There are some children at some point that they might not really need to apply at first. We really need to give them questions that would make them to remember. And there are some that we also need to give them some certain questions that would need them to create and analyze. And some learners, looking at different learners in our classroom, basically, we should be able to know how to put up comprehension questions in the class in order to engage them. When we put up some critical thinking questions, some might not be able to understand, why some will be able to do it instantly. So using Bloom's taxonomy in our comprehension would make all learners to be carried along at the same time. Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you very much. Does anybody else have something else to say? Or you want to affirm what she has said? We have just 2 more minutes for this. Wow. Is Mrs. Igwe the only one who has something to say in this line? Okay, I see some comments.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I dropped some comments. I didn't want to talk, but I felt you didn't say it, so I just wanted to air my view. So one of the things I've learned over time is that the lowest level of comprehension a child can show you is remembering what you said. Some of them are good at telling you verbatim what they heard, while others just check in the text and repeat the lines. But oftentimes, as you ask deeper questions, you find the level of comprehension dwindling. And so, as you that's if you're now using the Bloom's taxonomy as a basis, you then find that as we go up the pyramid, the level of comprehension is supposed to show in their ability to either compare text, in their ability to look at how a particular thing is affecting something else. That's analyzing text and doing all the other things. So I feel that comprehension and Bloom's taxonomy actually work in tandem to improve learning in the classroom. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So we have some comments in the comment section, like she mentioned. The lowest level of comprehension questions are questions that call for active recall of the subject matter. True. The first and second steps require that a child comprehends first. If they can't, all other steps won't take place. I agree. As the learners show deeper comprehension, they'll be able to infer, predict, and compare characters. That's beautiful. So any other thoughts before we move on, please? Comments and all that before, because our time is now gone for that activity. Okay. So let's start from somewhere. We teach in class, we are the ones who teach the comprehension. Now we are the students for today. So please indulge me, okay? I'm going to be sharing, I'll share in the comment section, but I'll also share my screen for us to see. I have 2 texts, so please check. I'm dropping them in the comment section right now, in the chat. Those are part of the resources for the session, actually. I won't be sharing my slides, but I will share a replay of the session. And you are getting this texts that we're learning with. They are comprehension texts actually, so they also come with questions. They can be used in the classroom or as you desire. But for this part, I want to crave your indulgence, pardon me. Please engage. When we ask for volunteers, when we ask you to say something, please do that. Okay? It's meant to be an interactive session. Oh, it is well this morning. It's meant to be an interactive session. So as much as possible, for you to get the best out of the session, you also have to give something, which is participate. So we're going to be reading The Day It Rained Cats and Dogs. That's our first step. Okay, Precious, let me quickly read this from Precious. Students recall basic fact from a passage. They always use information from the passage in new context. And at some point, students make judgment about the passage. True. Oh, the text is closing. Please give me a minute. So the text is finally open now. All right, welcome to class. This morning, we will be reading an interesting text. Have you ever heard of the term raining cats and dogs before? It's actually an idiomatic expression. So have you heard of it before? When you hear raining cats and dogs, what comes to your mind? Do you think that cats and dogs are literally falling from the sky? Thank you, Oluchi. All right, so now let's read this text. It's titled The Day It Rained Cats and Dogs. So what do you think happened when you hear this title? Please share with me. What do you think happened in the text? And what do you think we are going to be reading about in this text? You can use the chat box. That is rained heavily. That's possible. What else do we think would have happened? Okay, now let's find out what actually happened in the story. Did it rain heavily or did something else happen? Let's find out. Let's see. Okay, there might be a flood. Many things could go bad. There might be storm and wind. There might be chaos. Awesome. Now, we need to find out what really happened. Our text today is The Day It Rained Cats and Dogs, and it's written by S. Bly in the year 2022. The author is a published author, blogger, and copywriter who lives outside of Washington, D.C. She misuses the word literally on a regular basis. So this is like helping us to gain insight into what prompted the story or the author's background, okay? An idiom is a phrase or group of words that cannot be understood from the meaning of each word on its own. Also, an idiom does not literally mean what it says. In the story, Gavi's grandmom tells him it's about to rain cats and dogs. As you read, take notes on what the characters mean when they say it is going to rain cats and dogs. Now, I want us to take the reading together, but we're going to work in pairs because of our time. So I want two people and reading the text. Shall I appoint Oluchi and Evelyn? Evelyn, can you unmute where you are? If you can't, it's fine. Maybe Oluchi and I think I saw Chinwe there. So would you read from the beginning?
Okay. Can you remove the black pointer, please?
You read together, starting from grown-ups.
Yeah. There's a blockage at the point now.
There's a what?
Blockage.
Okay, it's okay. We are fine now.
Yeah.
All right, let's go. Grown-ups say really strange things sometimes. Daddy thought as he walked home in the pouring rain, right before he left his grandparents' house. His grandmom had tutted at the clouds and said, "It's going to rain cats and dogs out there. We better bundle you up." And with that, she handed him an umbrella, made pop up dig out an old raincoat that hung together his knees, and pushed his feet into a pair of giant fishing boots, stuffed with paper, so he wouldn't slip right out of them. He didn't mind the feet an extra plus, even though the rain was warm. It rarely rained cold in the small town of Little Acres. It was going to rain fast and heavy, even though these thoughts of storms only lasted a few minutes. It would be soaked to the bone if he walked home without extra layers. Evelyn, can you go on
Thank you.
from there?
Can the next person please pick it up from there?
Okay. As he walked, he made sure to jump through every puddle he could find, marveling that his socks were staying completely dry inside of the huge rubber boots. He thought about the words his grandmom had used. Rain, cats, and dogs. What did that even mean?
All right.
Suddenly,
Somebody
he
else.
heard a high-pitched... Okay.
Is there somebody else read the last paragraph?
Suddenly, he had a high-pitched yelling. He looked up to see a stripped gray cat fall slowly from the sky, land on its feet. Of course, it did, and scurry off into the alley between two houses.
Thank you. Okay. Now that we have read it together as a group, I want you to take a few minutes to read quietly to yourself. As you read, look out for words that you do not know or words that you are not familiar with, and write them out somewhere in your notebook. Then we will discuss them as well as finding out if it did rain cats and dogs. So you have a few minutes to just read through quietly to yourself. Let me know when you want me to scroll up. Shall I scroll up now?
Yes, a little bit more.
Okay. Are we done? Are we done reading to ourselves? Are you with me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, beautiful. Now let's consider the new words first. Are there any words that you couldn't decipher the meaning? Any new words that you just learned?
Scurry. One of it is scurry.
Scurry. Okay. Now, would somebody get the dictionary and read to us? I have my dictionary with me, so I'm just going to go to the dictionary and read. Scurry is to move quickly with small, short steps. So it means that the the cat moved away very quickly. Tottered. Yes. So let's see. What does that mean? I have to go back a little. For some reason, it's not up. Can somebody else use their dictionary? And then I'm going to assign tasks to us now. Gladys, please check for the meaning of yowling. And what's the other word we have? Okay, that's it. Okay, then there's puddle. Puddle and fuss. This is a grade 4 text. Okay, please go ahead and read out the definition.
Okay. For the started, I got the pronunciation and the meaning as well. So,
Beautiful. So please go ahead.
okay, it says to express disapproval or disbelief by or as if by uttering thought. So it just simply means to express disapproval or disbelief.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. So
You're welcome.
who's reading the next one? Okay, so I'll just move on because of our time.
Okay, y'all is to make a long, loud cry that sounds unhappy.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So now, with these definitions of these words that you're not familiar with, you're going to read the text one more time, this time with understanding of what each of those words now mean. Okay? So let's assume that we have read it again, okay? Now, in the text, we see where is that? Where Gavi looked up and a stripped gray cat fell to the ground. Before then, he had just thought about grandmom's words, which is rain cats and dogs. So do you think that after the cat fell from the sky, there will be a dog following? Do you think that might happen? And do you think it is thoughts that made it happen, or that was what grandmom meant in the first place, that it will rain cats and dogs? Please drop your predictions in the comment section as we move on to the next part of the text. So let's have somebody else continue reading. Another volunteer, or shall I appoint again?
Shall I?
You start from well. That was strange. Okay, a dog should follow, but his imagination, not what his grandma really meant. Thank you, Evelyn. Please remember I asked us at the beginning to participate. So Irene, Dorcas, Mary, Mayowa, Chinwe, Oluwatomi, Oluwatosin, Emanuela, Precious, Teresa. Who's reading the next part? I know this doesn't sound like what you expected. Don't worry, we have the slides part. This is the class part. We have a demo class, and then all right, so I'll just read for the purpose of this class. But you know, in a typical class, you should allow your learners to do the reading, and then you correct as they read. We find new words. You can go ahead and identify some before the class, discuss definition, and then go into the text, or you read with the learners and allow them to pick words that are foreign to them. I do both. Even when I have itemized some words, like I posted in the comment section as we're about to start the reading, like 4 words that I felt might be new words. You never can tell what words some children might struggle with. So it's always a good one to allow them to also pick new words. So what I do in a physical class is, as the learners are sharing these new words, I start making a list on the board. And then after we have collated the list, then we go on to use our dictionaries to find the meanings of the words. Different learners read out the meanings and sometimes pronunciations if we argue over a pronunciation or something, depending on the age, okay? So now read the next part of the text to save our time. Well, that was strange. Oh, by the way, reading the first part of the text and pausing to discuss was to allow us to predict, or allow learners to predict. We had a prediction at the beginning where I asked us to predict what we would read in the text or what the title might mean. And then we read part of the way, and I asked you to predict the next part. So in a physical classroom, it's either I don't allow them to turn the page if it's a long text like this one before we have to make the prediction, or if it's just one page, we read maybe a paragraph or 2, then I ask them to cover the lower part with a notebook, okay, so they don't spy into that second part while making their predictions. Then we go on from there. As we go on, you understand the place of predictions in the text. When you use, I think it's the Collins now. There's this old book, I've forgotten the title. I think Nelson comprehension now. You have in the comprehension part, you have thinking ahead, thinking about it, and I've forgotten what the third one is. But the thinking ahead is what the prediction is also doing. Okay. So let's proceed. Pardon me? Is that for me?
Yeah, that Nelson thinking ahead for their comprehension.
Oh, yes. Yes. Thank you. Well, that was strange. Yes, the Nelson Thons. I really love those books. They are one of my favorite books, the comprehension books. Well, that was strange. Gavi looked around. He was standing at the intersection of Idiom Lane and Axiom Avenue. Now, for older students and adults, the names of the names used in this text, the name of where they live, literal acres, and all that, will also form part of our discussion later on because it's a deliberate play on words by the author. It was where the two main roads in his little town met. So there were houses and trees all around him. He guessed the cat had leapt from a nearby tree or roof, maybe from a wooden fence. Although it didn't seem high enough for how far the cat fell. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a blur of fur. Turned just in time to see a big apricot-colored dog with curly hair land in the middle of the street. The dog seemed as surprised as Gabby felt. It looked down at itself, jumped over to the sidewalk, and shook itself off. Trying to dry itself off was completely useless in the rain, and it made Gabby laugh. The dog looked over at Gabby. It seemed to smile at him, its tail wagging, spraying more water everywhere. He trotted over to Gabby, who knelt to say hello. The dog licked Gabby's face, which had remained dry until that moment, thanks to the umbrella and raincoat hood. Gabby laughed again and tousled the wet dog's fur. Remember, in this part, we still write the new words, okay? And tousled the wet dog's fur. He was about to stand back up when he heard a soft bump against his umbrella. A tiny white ball of fur had bounced off the umbrella and landed in a puddle. It was a kitten with big blue eyes. It looked at Gabby holding the big umbrella, then at the large, curly-haired dog staring back with its tongue sticking out. The kitten then glanced behind it, where the puddle was deeper and darker. It couldn't seem to decide which choice was the worst. The dog took a few steps towards the kitten. The kitten backed up and tried curling itself into a little ball. The dog gently nursed the kitten and picked it off by the scruff of its neck, the way mama cats do. Then, of all things, the dog carried the kitten out of the puddle and began licking it. The kitten seemed more shocked than Gabby did. Gabby watched the two of them for a few minutes. Then he remembered that these two animals had just shown up out of nowhere. They really fell from the sky. When he stood back up, he realized the rain had stopped. As expected, the rainstorm had finished just as quickly as it began. Gabby shut the umbrella and lowered the giant hood of his raincoat. He noticed there were a dozen more cats, dogs, kittens, and puppies wandering around. They looked dazed and confused, all of them whining and mewing. There was a big hound dog, and next to it was a sleek Siamese cat on one side of the street. Two matching puppies were play fighting in the wet grass. A big orange tomcat was scratching at a tree trunk. Everywhere Gavi looked, he saw a cat or dog. He had no idea what had happened, why it had happened, or what to do. His tiny town didn't have an animal shelter. He couldn't just leave them here. But where could all these animals go? Gavi sat on the curb to think. The apricot dog had decided the kitten was cleaned up enough. It sat down by Gavi, thumbed its tail on the street, and licked Gavi's nose. The feeling made Gavi giggle and want to sneeze at the same time. Suddenly, Gavi had an idea. He ran back to his grandmom's house. He grabbed the big red wagon that she kept on her porch. He pulled the wagon back to the corner where all the animals were. He picked up the hound dog and put it in the wagon. He took the hound over to Old Man Jones, who lived all alone in a house a block away. He put the hound dog on the porch rocker, knocked on the door, and then ran back down the sidewalk. This time, Gabby picked up the two puppies. They stopped tussling with each other long enough to nip at his fingers. He put them in the wagon. He walked a block in the opposite direction of Old Man Jones to the Wiley's house. Mrs. Wiley had two 10-year-old twins and always looked tired. She had told Gabby's mom that the twins were like non-stop full throttle energy machines. She couldn't keep up with them. Gabby thought if they each had their own puppy to play with, run after and train, Mrs. Wiley might get a chance to rest. I want to stop here, but you have the text, you just read through and all that. Let me just go straight towards the ending. We'll come visit all the time, he whispered, as after he puts the different animals in different places. Gavi knocked his special knock, the one he used so his grandparents knew it was him at the door, and then ran off. The dog followed. When Gavi finally got home, he called out to his parents, "Mama, Pops, I have a new friend. Can we keep it?" He looked at the dog. It sat down and wagged its tongue. Gavi put a hand on his chin and thought for a moment before announcing, "I named it Rain." So, did it rain cats and dogs? Yes, it did. But what happened? We'll never know because we do not have all there is. We don't have the entire story or text as it is. We just have this part, and the author doesn't say anything about it. But then, what do we think happened? Thank you, Theresa. What do we think happened in the text? Why did it rain cats and dogs? And what do we think happened next? Did all those people come out, see the animals, and adopt them? Or did they chase the animals away? What do we think happened next? We haven't responded. What do we think happened next? Now, so when this question is asked from our learners, it's important that we teach them what is expected. Some texts will ask, what do you think would happen next? While some would ask, why would you want to continue reading the story? Or why would anyone want to continue reading the story? When that question is asked, it is unacceptable for the children to say, because I want to find out what happened next. That's not acceptable, especially for external exams. In answering that question, the children need to still refer to something that happened in the text. So I would want to find out what happened next to know if, yes, thank you, Faith. So I want to know what happened next to know if the neighbors accepted the pets or chased them away. That's one option. Oh, I would want to know if Gavi's parents allowed him to keep the dog. I would want to continue reading because I would like to find out why the cats and dogs were falling from the sky. Do we understand? So these are the kind of questions that our learners should be able, kind of answers that our learners should be able to give when these questions are asked. Now, we talked about Bloom's taxonomy, right? As much as possible, I would have wanted us to read the second text, but because of our time, we won't be able to do that. Otherwise, we are not going to be able to finish, okay? Because we're supposed to do the two texts in the first hour, and then in the second hour, we then begin to look at the skills and the teaching in themselves. But you know, we lost some time at the beginning, so please read the text. The text, the essence of having the two texts is just to have text across different age groups. So this first one is for years 3 and 4. The second text is supposed to be years 7 and 8. So we do something in primary and something in college, okay? But I hope our college friends will pardon me. It's still the basic principles, the same things that we do in terms of how we teach the new words, introduce the text, talk about the author. It's very important, even if it's just the blurb that gives you the information about the author. When we are teaching the unit on, I've forgotten what that unit is usually called, like author something something. I think author response, where, the learners can then write a letter to the author. Well, the letter may be sent to the author in real life or may just remain in their notebooks. But when we get to that unit, there's a different way that it is handled, okay? But that's not for today. So let's talk about teaching comprehension effectively in our schools and classrooms. Yes, thank you, author's purpose. The demo is not complete because we did not look at the assessment questions, but that's also a deliberate act. Because I do not go into assessment questions immediately. I start asking questions to engage them. But if I start talking about that now, I would have gone ahead of myself, okay? Just bear with me. This, like I mentioned, this laptop can be very slow. But at least thank God I have a second laptop to use. Otherwise, I would have used my phone and I didn't mind really. Trying to take away that obstruction. Beautiful. All right, so teaching English comprehension effectively. What are the objectives of our session? First, it's to help us understand and discuss the importance of English comprehension in student literacy, for us to explore strategies to teach comprehension effectively, and then to learn how to use Bloom's taxonomy to develop comprehension skills. What is English comprehension? It's that ability that a person has to understand and interpret written text. And based on this, it involves extracting meaning from words, sentences, paragraphs, and making connections between ideas. So yes, in terms of comprehension, there are different levels to it. But it's a journey that starts from, okay, what has been read? Do I understand it? What does it mean? And then being able to translate this understanding in writing. I often tell people that the way we speak is different from the way we write. They might have similarities, but they are different. But you see, sometimes somebody might be able to put words in writing and it's fantastic. But is that person able to articulate the words? Think about it, okay? So, comprehension involves extracting meaning from words, sentences, and paragraphs, and making connections between ideas, being able to create a link between A and B, and taking that understanding to a different context to apply. Why is comprehension important for our learners? Excuse me. It is very essential for academic success, not just in English language classes, but across all learning areas. And we'll soon see why. When comprehension is high, performance in other subjects will be high. So when comprehension is high, other subjects do well as well. Learners understand them easily, they're able to transfer learning. But when we struggle with comprehension in our classrooms or in our schools, it affects academic success in some way. Comprehension is important because it helps students to grasp concepts easily. They're able to solve problems, they're able to engage in meaningful discussions. It is one thing for a child to be able to read texts with higher lexicals, but does the child understand? So telling me, for instance, that, oh, my 5-year-old can read a text meant for year 12. Fantastic. Does the child understand the words? Can the child explain what has been read? So there must be comprehension for there to be meaningful discussions and for effective communication. How many of us have been on social media and you have wondered what warranted some responses to some posts? If it's happened to you before, a wave of hands, a show of hands, or use your emojis, or you can just drop it in the comment section. Let me give you an example. So, Alibaba, the ace comedian, by the way, that man is also a lecturer and holds a PhD. So he's very intelligent. I follow him on social media. And occasionally he'd make a post dripping, literally dripping in sarcasm. But you would have people come up under that post and begin to call him names or, insult, be rude. Because the meaning of that post was completely lost on them. When I see these things, I go, oh my God, comprehension is a problem here. Because really, it's a lack of comprehension that has hindered understanding, that has hindered communication in that area. Can we hear me? I want to be sure that I'm not talking to myself. So if you can hear me, please type in the comment section, yes. If you can hear me, please type yes in the comment section. Thank you. All right. So it also plays a crucial role in effective communication, allowing individuals to understand and respond to written information. So, what are the skills involved in comprehension learning, comprehension classes? Thank you, Manuela. The skills that are involved when we do this are literal, inferential, and evaluative. What do they mean? Let's find out. So literal skills has to do with understanding the literal meaning of texts. This is simply based on facts from the text. For instance, in the text that we read today, where does Gavi live? Gavi lives in literal acres. That's literal. Because it's given in the text and there is no special skill required to answer the question, right? So it's simply direct recall of facts from the text. That's one level of skill. The other one is inferential, and this tends to suffer when our children have not been taught how to think. Comprehension is about thinking, but we need to teach our learners how to think. And that's also why when students who have been taught maybe with a certain curriculum have to sit for external exams, they struggle with comprehension. They might do well with grammar and punctuation and vocabulary, but when it comes to the comprehension part, there is a dip in performance. Why? Because we have not taught our learners how to think. This shows up more in the inferential skills and in inferential questions. This has to do with identifying key ideas and themes in the text. And many times it requires the students to be able to read between the lines to make inferences based on the text. So if you have a question, for instance, that asks, how do you know that Tom has a good relationship with people in literal acres or with his neighbors? The text does not actually tell us he has a good relationship with his neighbors, but we can infer from the fact that he knew what different people needed. And so he gave them the animals that suit their peculiar needs. That can only be inferred. And then evaluative. These are questions that encourage students to make judgments about the text. Is it effective? What do you think the author meant by this? Would you say that the language is this? How does the author use language to create suspense in the text, for instance? How does the author create mood in the text? These are evaluative. It's requiring the learners to make judgments about different aspects of the text. Now let's talk about these strategies that we need to teach our learners in our classrooms. We have skimming, scanning, and close reading. What are these? Skimming is to quickly read through a text, which was that first reading that we did. To quickly read through a text to grasp the main idea, to get an understanding of what the text is about. Oh, what's this text saying? What is it really about? That's what skimming does for you. That second reading we did, where we're now looking for new words, that was scanning. Okay? So when we skim, we can look through the headings, the subheadings. We can just read through very quickly and say, oh, this is what the text is about. But when you are asked detailed questions, you have to go back, and that's scanning. You have to go back to look for the specific information. At this time, your eyes are also reading and moving quickly, but this time there is something specific that you are searching for. Then you have close reading. Close reading has to do with a detailed and in-depth analysis of the text. You have been given questions to answer now. So you read through to find the portion of text that would answer that question, and then you read around it. Especially when, for instance, you want to find contextual meaning of a word. We want you to be able to define a word based on its use in the passage. We do not want you to make use of a dictionary. So what do? You close read. You find the word, you read the line where the word is found, you read the line or paragraph around it to gain some understanding of that word. And if you have to use a synonym, for instance, or you have to come up with a synonym, you have to test the synonym in the same position as that word to be sure that it would effectively answer the question or effectively complete the sentence. Close reading requires careful attention to vocabulary, sentence structure, and deeper meanings. And it allows students to gain a comprehensive understanding of the content. So, why is comprehension so important to learning? Here's our Bloom's taxonomy again. If you were to summarize Bloom's taxonomy in one word, that word would be think. If we were to put comprehension mildly, we would also say comprehension is thinking. And so both are closely related because they have to do with using our brains to analyze information, to synthesize information, to use information in different ways. Okay, so we are going to look through Bloom's taxonomy step by step, starting from remember, ending up with create, and how it is reflected in our comprehension classes. For you to really understand what I meant when I said that if comprehension was high, then performance would be high in other areas. Because one of the skills that the 21st century learner must have is critical thinking. And how best can we teach critical thinking in our classrooms? It is through comprehension. And so when we are ignorant of the power of this area of English language teaching, then critical thinking would suffer in our schools and in our learners. And it means that we are not setting them up appropriately for success in life. So Mary, the teachers have to go through comprehension sessions, literally. So why am I talking about Bloom's taxonomy? It provides a structured framework to promote deeper learning. Even in our classrooms, why is it important? The psychologist that came up with it, and Benjamin Bloom, knew what he was doing. It was because he had observed and seen the power of thinking and the different levels of thinking that we engage in. Now, these thinking are not necessarily sequential, meaning that they do not necessarily follow as we see them. They have been written that way because of how high they happen to, how do I put it now? How high they are on the scale. But it doesn't mean that you must analyze before you create. You might not necessarily do one before the other. You might do them concurrently, okay? So Bloom's taxonomy provides that structured framework for deeper learning. It also helps to guide teachers. It also helps teachers guide students from basic understanding to higher order thinking. And that higher order thinking is very important. We need to arrive there. So let's take them one after the other through the lens of English comprehension, or comprehension in any language actually, as a subject now. The first level, which is remember, how is it represented in comprehension classes? It is in helping learners to recall key information from the text. How do we do this? Number one, when we ask factual questions about the text, like what happened to Gavi? Gavi was going home in the rain, and cats and dogs fell all around him. That's an example, right? So this skill requires the use of the 5 buttons on a bench. That's who, what, when, where, why, and how. These 6 questions are in that level. It doesn't mean that they cannot show up in another level. Examples: who is the main character in the story? We would say Gavi is the main character in the story. What event led to the conflict? What's the conflict now? The conflict was that cats and dogs literally rained from the sky around Gavi. What event led to it? Oh, Gavi was going home. His grandma said it will rain cats and dogs. And it did rain cats and dogs, right? So what are the strategies that we can use to drive this? Encourage skimming and scanning. Do you know that there are some learners who do not read passages before they attempt to answer questions? I have met them. I have taught them. So what's that this saying, oh, may we see them, may we have them. This is a case of may we not have them. But you see, for you not to have them, you have, sorry, I was checking the charts. I see that I covered the portion of the screen. So when we are saying, in this case, it's may we not have them, may we not have learners who will do that. But for us not to have learners who will do that, then we have to teach them that the first step is to read. You may assume that they would know, but you'll be shocked that I've had learners up to college do that. Can you imagine a year 9 student answering comprehension passages or questions without first reading the passage? I know I was marking. Excuse you, did you read this passage? Oh no, I'd read the story. No, you don't do that, young man. It doesn't matter if you read the text last night. You have to read the passage again. So we need to teach them to read using skimming and scanning techniques. And then some will read once and they don't go back to the text after they start reading the questions. It is not enough to read the first time. They have to go back after reading the questions to find the answers. Otherwise, they might answer out of context. You have to teach your learners that when it comes to comprehension text or tasks, you answer based on the passage you have been given at that moment. Do we understand? And please, I think it was Mary that asked these questions. The adults too need to know. Literally, if you have adults who cannot teach critical thinking, do comprehension classes with them. You are not teaching them how to teach comprehension. They are your students. In this case, you are driving thinking. I'll give us examples of the questions we can ask. I hope, oh my goodness, we have 30 minutes more. That's not possible. Let me try to fly. But I need us to go back to the passage, and then you will see how I literally drive critical thinking in my lessons. Before I even look at the questions, even if I'm the one that said those questions, I would still drive it through conversations, through the questions I would ask, the quality of the questions, and the style of questioning to drive the thinking that is required. So you encourage skimming and scanning techniques. You can have your students highlight important details in the text. So some people ask students to underline or use a highlighter. But these days, most of us, we use rental books for those subjects, right? So it might not really be possible for them to highlight or underline. But if it's a worksheet or if it's an online session, be my guest. So instead of asking them to annotate on the document, I would ask them to simply look for it and then put a finger by it and write out in their reading journal or in their notebook, depending on what point we are in the lesson. Now, the next point is understanding, the next level of thinking, understand. This is to make sure that your learners grasp the meaning. This is to make sure that your learners grasp the meaning of the text and can explain it. You'll be shocked when you ask a learner to read and then tell you what they have read, and then you hear Greek and Latin, like I tell my learners. So when they start speaking out of context, I tell them, you're speaking in Greek and Latin. I don't speak those languages. Do you understand? I'm like, excuse me, who is writing Greek and Latin in my notebook? You know. So you want to be sure that your learners were not thinking in Greek and Latin while you thought they were thinking in English. One way we do that is after we have discussed, or sometimes before we discuss, after we have read, I tell them, with your elbow partner or with your group, depending on how many they are. Sometimes it will be in pairs, which is more common. Sometimes it could be in small groups of 3, the learning triangle. So in your, let's say in your learning triangle, or, you know, so your learning triangle, narrate the story to each other in 1 minute. So we play just a minute. In that 1 minute, person A starts. Just a minute. This version is better for 2 people. If there are 3, then give each of them 1 minute. But if there are 2, they can do 30 seconds. This one, person A or child A starts to narrate the events in the text. After 30 seconds, child B picks it up to complete. That's one. If there are 3, there is a speaker, there is a listener, there is a recorder. So each of them gets 1 minute to play each of the roles. So that will take you like 9 minutes. So it depends on the time you have in the class. But you can ask them to simply summarize what happened in the text, or what happened in the text that we have just read. In 1 minute, rehash the text to your teammates. Let's play just a minute. So you start, after 30 seconds, he or she continues the text. And then you walk the room to listen to them. Some will already disagree with each other that no, that's not what happened next. Before that one, this one happened. Okay? So what you are doing is you are driving the level on the stand in Bloom's taxonomy. You're asking them to paraphrase, you're asking them to summarize. Paraphrase, say it in your own words. That also helps you to see if there is understanding or not. You can also ask them to use concept maps to show relationship between ideas. They can just draw, write an idea, link it with an arrow to the next one, you know, and move all the way on. We're not done with understand. So what are examples of this in our lessons? Summarize the paragraph in your own words. Explain why the character made a certain decision. What are the strategies you can use? Teach them to use context clues for understanding unfamiliar words. I've mentioned using context clues earlier, but I talked about finding meanings of words without using the dictionary based on its use in the text. And then encourage group discussions. See, I have learned that speaking out loud drives understanding, helps than, oh, you have read it, go ahead and answer the passage. No. You are not teaching comprehension that way. Because some will write and do what we call mindless lifting. And some will get it right, but it will be more like guesswork. And so you can't really say if your learners understand or not. Now let's talk about apply or applying. Now it's apply. Encourage learners to use knowledge from the text in new contexts. That's application. So they must be able to apply the lesson or the themes from the text to real life situations. Examples. How would you react if you're in the character's position? Can you think of a situation where the same lesson applies? So, what are the strategies we can use to do this? Role play. Let me give you an example of role play you can do. You can do hot sitting activity. Let's say, okay, yes, Gavi, we have read Gavi's text already. So ask a volunteer to be Gavi. I was going to have us do that, but because of our time, we won't be able to do that. So have a volunteer come up to be Gabi. Place the child's chair at the front of the classroom. The child takes a seat, and then tell the rest of the class to think of questions they would have asked Gavi if Gavi were to stand before them in real life. Now tell them Evelyn is now Gavi. So all those questions you are going to ask Evelyn now. It's always ideal that when you ask them to think of those questions, you tell them to jot down. Precious, please, you are annotating on the screen. Precious, please wipe off the annotation. Thank you. So ask them to jot down the things. Precious, thank you. Oh, Jay, you're doing it again. I really don't have time to block annotation. So tell them to write down the questions they would have wanted to ask Gavi if they were to see Gavi in real life. It's ideal to specify so that it doesn't take the whole lesson. Oh, write down 1, 2, or 3 questions you would ask Gavi if Gavi were to come into our classroom right now. And so you have questions like, Gavi, how did you feel when the first cat fell? Did you think another animal would come after that? Did you think that or do you think that the cats and dogs really fell from the sky? You know, children, you'll be amazed at the level of reasoning that you would see in that room if you allow them. So ask them to come up with the questions, and then the child role-playing Gavi would answer the questions as best as he or she could. But you see, to even answer the question, he has to get into character. So tell him, close your eyes, imagine that you are Gavi. Now answer questions based on that. That's one role-playing scenario. There are different role-play scenarios we could use. Another way we can apply the learning is ask the students to write a letter or diary entry as one of the characters. You can also ask the learners to rewrite the story from a different point of view. So now we read the text in the third person point of view. You can ask them to rewrite the letter, to write the text. This time they are Gavi. So sit down and think. You are Gavi, you are telling your story. How would you say it? Grandmom Gavi, oh dear, grandmom's calling me again. I think she wants us to leave now and I'm not done playing. Oh my goodness. Did the cat actually fall from the sky? I'm sure it must have fallen from a building close by. There's so many houses around here. And then, did that dog just fall from the sky? Do you understand? So, that is the learners applying the lesson or applying the theme from the text in real life situations. And when you're doing that, you are encouraging them to think. You are driving critical thinking in your classroom. Then analyze. Here, you help learners break down the text into parts and then explore the relationships between ideas. What are the ways this can happen? They can identify cause and effect. They can analyze the characters, motivations, and the themes in the text. Oh, what is the author? What message does the author have for us as readers? What is the author trying to teach us? What is it trying to tell us? Examples that I put here. What was the turning point in the story and why? Compare and contrast two characters' reactions to the same event. What strategies can we use for this? We can teach them how to identify the main idea and supporting details. This is more common with nonfiction, the supporting details part. So what is the main idea in this paragraph? Oh, that water is good for everyone. How do you know? What are the supporting details? What's the evidence? My learners know me. When you answer a question, you must have evidence from the text to support your answer. So even in fictional text, do you think Gavi was afraid? No, I do not think Gavi was afraid, or I don't think Gavi was afraid. That's not enough answer for me, especially for years 3 and above. How do you know? You must give me evidence from the text. You must support your answer with evidence from the text. So they go back to the text and then say, oh no, I do not think Gavi was afraid, because in the text, then for year 6, I would even insist that they should state the line or what paragraph from the text that their quotes came from. So they must pick something from the text to show that they didn't just pull up the idea from the air, pull it out of air, of thin air, 1, 2, to also show that they actually understand and for the analysis to be complete. You can use graphic organizers like Venn diagrams when you are making comparisons. They can create tables. You can use timelines as well. Show a timeline of the events in the story. So that is analysis taking place. You are doing an analysis. Oh, this happened before this. See, do you know that in teaching comprehension, you can teach several other subjects? There's a lot of cross-curricular activities that happens in comprehension. I have taught math, I have taught science, I have taught geography, social studies, gender talks, rainforest, all sorts, just in teaching comprehension. I've had learners say, oh wow, Ms. Babatunde, you're not just good at teaching English, you can actually teach maths very well, which is true. But it was in a comprehension class. Okay? Let's move on so that I'll really be able to drive some of the things I talked about. Then evaluate. You have to enable learners to make judgments about the text based on certain criteria. So you and the learners can come up with success criteria. You can come up with evaluation criteria, for instance. Encourage your students to form opinions and justify. Remember, I mentioned supporting with evidence. So even when we are having discussions, you justify that opinion you have just shared based on evidence from the text. Answers should be based on evidence from the text, even inferential answers. Was the character's decision the right one? Why or why not? I do not think, or I think Gavi's decision to put the animals in the neighbors' houses or in front of the neighbors' houses was the right one, because Literal Acres does not have an animal shelter, and the animals wouldn't know where to go or what to do. It would not benefit the community if the animals were to turn wild. So in the best interest of the community, Gavi took the right decision. And I have a feeling, now this, you have moved into opinion there. And I have a feeling that the residents would accept the animals, because the one character that we have come to know in the text, which is Gavi, turned out to be a caring person. It appears that the community is okay. Valentina, you get a recording, but I also have an offer for us at the end if you're on any of the platforms. Okay, so that's the first thing. Another example is to evaluate the author's use of language. Did it effectively convey the message? They would say why or why not, and then use language evidence to support it. For instance, if the question is saying something like, how does the author drive suspense or use language to drive suspense in the text? Oh, fantastic. Come up with evidence from the text where he uses words like, let's say he's driving fear. He's trying to drive fear, or he's trying to drive suspense. Okay, yeah, he drives suspense now. So he suggests how he used long winding sentences to slow down the pace of the story and build up suspense. Okay, so that's an example. You can talk about use of adjectives, the kind of adjectives used, the kind of vocabulary used in the text. Strategies that we can use to drive this level of thinking. You can ask learners to debate key issues in the text. They can debate with you as a class, that the whole class against you. They can debate against each other. You can put them in groups, not necessarily debate as in, oh, good, a panel of judges. No, they're just sharing opinions and sharing different opinions. Oh, I agree. Oh, I disagree. Why do you agree? Why do you disagree? They should be able to refer to the text to answer this. Then you can also create rubrics. It's always good to create your rubrics ahead, or you can create the rubrics with the learners to evaluate the quality of the text. If it's a text that you're also going to link to creative writing, which is the ideal thing, then you can also teach the creative writing, then come back to this evaluation. So we have analyzed features of an adventure story, for instance, right? So we have discussed features of an adventure story. Does this text fit into the class of adventure story? So one, does it have suspense? Is there some form of mystery to it? Begin to analyze language features, structural features based on rubrics developed. And then to the highest level of thinking, like we like to call it, we must then guide learners in generating new ideas based on the text. How do you do this? Have learners create their own version of the story. Remember, we had talked about this in applying as well. It also comes here. So now, at this level, you are not asking them to rewrite in maybe a particular viewpoint. You are asking them to write their own story, but it should be in a similar style as the sample text you have read. The rubrics you created in the previous thinking would also come in here, because those rubrics will now guide them that when they are done writing, they should check themselves against those rubrics. Does my own writing also tick the boxes? Also ask them to create an alternate ending or a continuation, a sequel. But you see, in creating an alternate ending, let me quickly say this, in creating an alternate ending to the text, they still have to work in line with the text. They have to use the characters, they have to use the setting. It must be seamless. The same thing for a sequel. They may introduce other characters, but they must maintain the main characters. They must maintain the style of writing, the language of the author. Examples of the questions you could give for this. Write an alternate ending to the story. Or create a new character and introduce them into the storyline. So in continuing Gavi's story, for instance, I hope we have time, because after everything, you're supposed to then answer a few questions. Okay, so what are strategies that we can use for this? We can have brainstorming sessions for new storylines or ideas. So you can put them in groups, or we can do a whole class modeling, okay? And then on the board, they are suggesting ideas, you are writing on the board. You work together, you get to a point and you ask them to complete it. You can write the first paragraph, tell them to continue, for instance, or you can create a plan together and then tell them to turn the plan into writing. But it will be a short writing, because it's not a creative writing class per se. It's a writing part of your comprehension class. Then you can encourage them to get creative using storyboards or visual storytelling. This they can do online. They can draw in their notebooks. They always like it when I now tell them to do something like this. They draw in their notebooks. We bring out the pencil crayons. But you better have double period for this, because they are going to milk it for all it's worth. All right, so let's talk about some more practical strategies, and then I will tell us about apt lifting and mindless lifting. So practical strategies that you can use in your classrooms We have guided reading sessions, something akin to what we did this morning, where we started with a guided reading session. Now, because we're adults, we didn't have issues of mispronunciations, for instance, but in a regular classroom, you tend to have some learners who wouldn't pronounce some words right, especially new words. You would teach them that. You would call their attention to it. Or some might not observe punctuation, for instance, you call their attention to it. Some might not inflect their voice as they should when there's a dialogue or in line with the punctuation, you call their attention to it as well. That's the benefit of guided reading sessions. Then use questioning strategies, open-ended and higher order questions, which is the short demo I want us to have. You know, I begged for a few minutes at the end, so let's just look at 10, 15, 11, 15, okay? Thank you. Maybe we can push 11:25. That's where started 9:22 actually. So, but let's see how it goes. Then reflective writing assignments. We mentioned some of them. Can also ask them about their opinion. If they were to find themselves in the character's shoes, what would they do? Or have you experienced something like this before, where you thought of something and it literally happened? How did you feel? Do you want to share what happened? What did you do? How did you react? Those are examples of reflecting writing assignment. Then group work and peer discussions. I've talked about this a lot for collaborative learning. Then incorporation of multimedia resources for better understanding. Like we started at the beginning, watching a short video on Bloom's taxonomy and a teacher in our classroom, how she was able to use it to plan lessons and all that. Okay. So in assessing comprehension, what are the things that we can do? Oral and written, please don't compromise on that. Don't do only oral, don't do only written, because there are different levels of skills. But you must do both. Even if it's only 2 questions, your learners can write. They should. If you notice that comprehension is suffering a lot in your school, you can have your learners do comprehension up to 3 times in a week. What do I mean? It's still the same text, but so instead of giving them 10 questions at once, split the questions into 4, 3, 3. So on the day the lesson was actually taught, they answer 4 questions in writing, apart from the oral questions. Let's say that was on Monday. On Wednesday, they take 3 questions as homework. You get the replay, Chama. But I'll get back to that as well. So on Wednesday, they answer another set of 3 as homework. Then on Friday, they take the final 3 as weekend homework. It's not about the number of the questions. It's about the practice of using their brain, their thinking skills again and again. And it helps them tremendously. Okay, thank you for reminding me about that one as well. I'll do that. Please confirm that you can see the text I read at the beginning in the comment section, Chama. Then we have essays, interactive assessments like quizzes. You can use quizzes, you can use games. Then there's a place of essays and reports where they analyze themes, characters, and plots. That is linking comprehension and creative writing. Very important. We have read a text. We should be able to take it to creative writing, analyze the texts, identify the genre of the texts, discuss the structure, and everything there is about that text. And then they write their own version of the text. Then you can also use rubrics for evaluating creative work. Or writing their own story, writing alternate endings, writing sequels, and all that. So, in conclusion, let's talk about apt lifting and mindless lifting. What do this mean? Those of us who are WAEC examiners should be familiar with these terms. When children answer questions or when students answer questions, they need to be careful to practice something called apt lifting, which is going to the text to quote directly from the text to answer the questions. Apt lifting is perfect and will get them full marks. Mindless lifting can cost them marks or make them lose marks completely. What's mindless and what is apt? So mindless lifting is you go to the passage and you just pick something that looks like the answer, not minding if it is grammatically correct or not, not minding if it has excess information or not. So, for instance, you have a question that says, what word tells us the time of day in the text? You probably have evening used somewhere. And then a learner now reads through, sees that there is evening, picks just evening and says evening, because the question says what one word or what word. That's already enough for you to know that it's one word that would answer that question. But another learner sees evening in a sentence and copies the entire sentence as his answer. That is mindless lifting, because the question is specific, one word. So your answer should be one word. All the other information around that word are irrelevant at that point in time. Do we understand? So copying the entire sentence is mindless lifting, while writing just the exact word required is apt lifting. So we have to teach our learners to pay attention to the question and ensure that they answer what is required. 1. 2, another example is, it didn't specify that it should be one word, but you see, in picking the answer from the passage, it's probably a phrase that answers that question from the passage. It is important to then make it grammatically correct. Not that you just pick it and say, okay, let's say, what time will they go to Mr. Biggs, for instance? And then there is a part in the passage that says, tomorrow we would go to Mr. Biggs, but for today, I just want to rest. And then the person now picks, we will go to Mr. Biggs. It does not answer the question at all. Or, no, that tomorrow is very simple. Or you just write it in such a way that, oh, it's a phrase from the middle of the sentence and just drops it like that. That would be a bit of mindless lifting as well. The person should put it in a context that is grammatically correct. Okay, yes, so it will now go there. What time? The person goes back to the passage, to the questions. The question is, what time will they go to Mr. Biggs? And then the person now writes, tomorrow we will go to Mr. Biggs. That's mindless lifting. The answer at that point should have been, they would go to Mr. Biggs the next day. Okay? So yes, the person is quoting based on what is in the text, but he has put it in a format that makes it grammatically correct. Do we understand? So now, let me just say the thank you now before we finish, because I won't come back to the slide. Thank you very much. Now let's go back to our passage. The day it rained cats and dogs. All right. So please get ready to use the chat box at this point, because I'll need us to please answer questions. What did Gavi think of grandmom's statement? It's going to rain cats and dogs out there. Please drop your answer in the comment section. What did Gavi think of grandma's statement? It's going to rain cats and dogs out there. I'm waiting, please. This is not the time to ghost me because this is our final activity as we round off, and it's I promise us that we will do this. I would ask us questions to demonstrate what I mean. Yes, Emanuela, you can unmute your mic or you can drop the comments in the chat box. I'm waiting, please. Let's not say, oh, I know it. Okay, yes, he thought it was strange. So now, question 1B. What evidence from the text supports your answer in 1A? Evelyn is not the only one in this class. Don't let her get all the questions and all the benefits. Okay, Teresa has responded now. Okay, so please take all feedback in good faith, okay? So Teresa, he thought, but you see, the question was, what did he think about what grandma said? So not what did, okay, thank you, Choma. Not what did Gavi think was going to happen. This is still his opinion of grandma's phrase. Yes, thank you, Evelyn. So supporting it now. In line 1 of the first paragraph, he says grown-ups say really strange things. Perfect. 1A and 1B from Evelyn, perfect. Faith, I'm sorry, no. What did he think about what grandma said? About grandma's statements? That was the question. What did Gavi think about grandma's statement? It's going to rain cats and dogs out there. What did he think about the statement itself? Not what did he think she meant, or what did he think about what she said? It's about the statement itself, and what he thought is right there at the beginning. Grown-ups say really strange things sometimes. Gavi thought as they walked home in the pouring rain. And then the author takes us back a little to what the grandma had said that made him think that adults think strange things or say strange things. Do we understand this now? Okay. Now, a literal question. Why did grandma sorry, I'm back to it. Yes, he thought it was strange. Thank you, Choma. Why did grandma stuff Gavi's boots with newspaper? Someone is annotating on the screen again. This is part of our lesson. Why did grandma stuff Gavi's boots with newspaper? That's a literal question. So we are rounding off the class we started at the beginning. So Gavi's feet won't sleep. Why did grandmom stuff Gavi's boots with newspaper? Yes, so Gavi won't sleep. So let me say this before I forget about it. It's important that we teach our learners to write their answers in full, unless stated otherwise. So for instance, instead of saying, so Gavi's feet won't sleep, it should be, She stuffed his boots so he would not sleep. Or Grandma stuffed Gabby's boots with newspaper so he wouldn't sleep out of them. Or she did that so that Gabby wouldn't sleep. Do you understand? Don't teach your learners to say, so we may feel, oh, they are small, but even in year one, they can write simple sentences and it becomes a part of them. So unless the question specifies what phrase is, write out the phrase that says, okay, and we'll have that soon. At what point in the text do we first get, this is higher order for higher classes actually, this next question. At what point in the text do we get a sense that it might actually rain cats and dogs? You need to think and read through. Still somewhere found in the portion. Yes, Mrs. Igwe. You don't start sentences with so. At what point in the text do we first get an inclination or a sense that it might actually rain cats and dogs? Or let me rephrase that. At what point in the text do we first get the sense that something might happen on the walk home? Another way to put it, at one point in the text, does the author give us a premonition or a warning that something might happen on the walk home? Good attempts, but not exactly. Like I said, this question is higher order for higher learners. I gave us a clue earlier in the class. Let me help us. At the point, now I've rephrased it to at what point does the author give us a clue? At the point of mentioning the name of the town, which is literal acres. This suggests that the thoughts or the statement from grammar must literally take place. That literal acres means literal land. So where things will literally happen. It's a literary style. The literary style of writing. So that's what I said for older learners. So this would be for college students. Okay. And maybe some year 6. Okay. Especially that sentence, it literally, yes. So it rarely rained cold in the small town of literal acres. So literal acres. What part of the text explains, or what explains the extra layers that grandmom had put on Gavi? What part of the text, or what explains the extra layers that grandma had piled up? It's still somewhere around here. Let me just answer it because I also want you to point out mindless and afflicting. Okay, someone is here. End of the paragraph. What does it say? You have to quote it. Because if my learners write end of paragraph, I will not give them the score. Yes, Edith, yes, she has stuffed his boot. But what explains? Okay, Evelyn, so this is a half answer you have given. Because you have to now start from these sorts of storms only lasted a few minutes. Or you could say, even though these sorts of storms lasted only a few minutes, he'd be soaked to the bone if he walked home without extra layers. So that is an explanation for the extra layers that grandmom had piled on him. Okay, good. So if you want to take it to more of literature, we can then ask for an example of onomatopoeia where we have yowling, for instance. Okay. But a simpler question could be, what adjective describes the sound made by the cat or the sound that Gavi heard? So what word or phrase describes the sound that Gavi heard? We're rounding off. It's right here on the screen. Yes, thank you, Evelyn. High-pitched yowling. Are the rest of us still here with us, please? And then you can go further to start asking for description of the cats. High-pitched yowling. Yes. Not too third faith. Don't worry, you have the text so you can read through again. You can ask learners to describe the cat. So they'll describe the cat was a striped gray cat. Yes. Literal question will be, where did the cat go to? Oh, the cat scurried off into the alley between two houses. Or what verb describes the cat's movements? The word would be scurry. Oh, sorry, Chama. What did Gavi think about the cat falling from the sky? Simple. He thought it was strange. And then you can quote that was strange. So at this point, I'd open the floor for questions before we call it a day. So for the sake of those who had issues earlier, and because of the issue that we had at the beginning, let me stop recording here. Okay. There will be, I'd offered a school a different time, so I would open it to the rest of us now. Those of us who had issues join at the beginning or struggle, if you simply just want to take the class again, we'll be back at 4 o'clock, the same link to take the session again. So if you had issues joining, you joined late, you missed the part, or you simply want to join us again, please be our guest at 4 p.m., same link, so that we can take it again. Any questions? I'll post, please give us your review. What do you think? Did you learn something? How did you find the class? I'm posting a link where you can do that in the comment section, and then that'll be it. So if you found it engaging,